Cliff, we're live now.
Good morning and welcome to this virtual press conference regarding Florida's bills, regarding Florida's voter suppression bills, as well as the anti-protest bills. Again, that's HB1, SB 90. And we're here today to give some more information about those bills and to talk about the corporate accountability campaign that we have launched in response to these bills. And so again, I'm with Black Voters Matter. We're based in Georgia, but we do work in 15 states. Some people may be familiar with the battle that we had right here in Georgia around voter suppression. One of the worst bills that we've seen since Jim Crow, not just Jim Crow of the 50s and 60s, but you have to go back to post-Reconstruction to find the kind of attacks that you're seeing about against voting rights, not just in Georgia, but all across this country, including in the state of Florida. And so we launched several weeks ago a corporate accountability campaign to deal with that voter suppression and to deal with those bills. We asked for companies, some specifically like Coca-Cola and Delta and Home Depot, to get in the game and get involved and to use their influence to fight back against those bills. Those companies eventually came out with statements too late after the bill was passed, but what it started was a wave of activism and a wave of companies across the country. We've now seen just recently as yesterday, hundreds of companies that have come out with statements against these voter suppression bills. But that's not where it has to end. It can't just end with statements. We need these companies to also take strong action. So part of what we're going to be talking about in this virtual press conference today is what it is that we expect these companies to do and how far we're willing to go to continue to pressure them to take action. This is not something where people can afford to be on both sides or playing a game talking about, we want to take a balanced approach. There is no balanced approach to Jim Crow. There is no both sides to Jim Crow and voter suppression. You're either on the side of the people or you're not. You're either on the side of democracy or you're not. You're either on the side of anti-racism, anti-attacks against Black and brown folks and young voters, or you're not. There is no both sides and there is no middle grounds. And that's part of what we're going to be talking about today. We're also going to give you some background on these bills, right? So that you could, for those who don't know, could be very clear about what it is that we're so concerned about in these bills. And we'll have some folks talking to you about where we are in the process, right? And what steps can still be taken. We have folks on this call today who are actually at the Capitol right now fighting the good fight against these bills. And so we'll be talking about all of that today with an incredible coalition. And that's something that I really want to emphasize. This is not about one organization, right? This is not just about Black Voters Matter or just about Dream Defenders or just about any one of the amazing groups that are on this call today. This is an incredible coalition that has been built, many of whom were willing to put their names and their logos onto an ad calling out the business community, which appeared in 5 regional newspapers across the state over the past week. And so this is an incredible coalition, which is just building on work that has already been going on in this state. In fact, it's because of that great work that's been going on in this state that you're seeing these attacks. People who try to cheat, people who try to target protests, people who try to suppress the vote, they don't do that because they're winning. They do that because they're losing. And they know that they're losing because of the work of the groups that are on this call here today. And so we are so proud to be in coalition with the folks that you're going to hear from today, as well as some of the other partners who couldn't be on here today, but are definitely a part of this coalition. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to our first speaker and my dear friend and sister, Rachel Gilmer from Dream Defenders, co-director of Dream Defenders. Rachel, please take it away.
Thanks, Cliff. So Dream Defenders was founded in 2012 when young people came together from across the state of Florida to demand justice in the murder of Trayvon Martin. And over the last, 2012 was 9 years ago. And, over that past almost decade, we have seen a generational movement rise up, calling for an end to racism and white supremacist violence. And last summer, we saw a huge manifestation of that movement when 26 million people all across the country of all walks of life took to the streets to demand justice in the murder of George Floyd. And, the country right now is watching the trial of Derek Chauvin, seeing testifier after testifier, people in tears, having witnessed the murder of George Floyd, and really calling on the country to really take a stand around police violence and ensure that we don't lose another Black life to the arms of police. And many, in this uprising, we've seen many corporations like Coca-Cola, corporations like Publix, Burger King, all come out and participate in this generational call in some way or another. Many participated in Blackout Tuesday. I don't know if people remember when people posted a black box on their social media in solidarity with Black lives. And really, we heard all of these corporations come out and say that they wanted to do more for Black people and make a commitment to doing more for Black people. So today we are calling on these corporations like Coca-Cola, corporations like Burger King, Disney, and Publix, people who said that they were standing with Black lives last summer, to come up and stand for our rights right now, which are under attack in the state of Florida. Our governor, Ron DeSantis, has introduced, it's his top legislative priority, a dangerous legislation to, rather than respond to the issue of police violence, rather than respond to the fact that people all across Florida took to the streets last summer, he is actually trying to criminalize us with his top legislative priority, HB 1. This is a dangerous bill which would make protesting a felony. Protesting is defined as more than 9 people blocking a road. That's a march. That would make it a felony up to 2 years in prison. He wants to make it punishable up to 15 years in prison for tearing down a Confederate flag. He wants to make it create all these protections for people who kill protesters. So our governor, again, rather than deal with the crises that our communities are facing right now, the fact that we are living in a pandemic, the fact that we have a broken unemployment system here in Florida, we have people who are being evicted, rather than address the issue of police violence, he wants to criminalize anybody who disagrees with him. He wants to attack our First Amendment rights. And we need everybody to say that these are not our priorities, that this is not our priority, and to take a stand. And so we are calling on corporations to join the diverse set of voices in Florida that are fighting against this bill, to come out and to take a stance as well. Over 60% of Floridians do not disagree with this bill. This comes, this is across race, across party. Basically, everybody is taking a stance against this bill in Florida, and we need these corporations to take a stance as well. If you are listening and you want to join our call to call on these corporations, again, Coca-Cola, Burger King, Publix, and Disney, to take a stand, we ask you to go to bit.ly/morethanablacksquare. If these corporations say they care about Black people, say they want to do more for Black lives, then we need them to stand up for our rights right now, which are under attack. We need them to stand up for democracy. And thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much for that, Rachel. And we'll be putting these links, we'll put them into the chats as well as the comments, I believe, on the live stream. Also want to take a minute just to let folks know, let reporters know that if you have questions, please feel free now to go ahead and even as you think of them, go on and put them in the chat so that when we get to our question and answer session, we'll already have those questions queued up. So now I want to turn it over, to Kara Gross, who is Legislative Director and Senior Policy Counsel for ACLU of Florida. Kara, take it away.
Thank you, Cliff, and thank you everybody for being here. Good morning. The ACLU of Florida strongly opposes SB 90. Voting is the cornerstone of our democracy and the foundation upon which the rest of our civil liberties lie. In 2020, approximately 4.8 million voters in Florida cast their ballots by mail, in the highest turnout in elections we have had for decades. More than 1.5 million Floridians used a drop box during the 2020 election to safely and conveniently securely return their ballot. But this bill, SB 90, makes administering elections in Florida more burdensome and unnecessarily difficult for Floridians. In the midst of a global pandemic, an impressive turnout that has not been seen in decades, no major election issues arose in Florida. However, the sweeping changes contained in SB 90 will wreak havoc on the processes that supervisors of elections throughout the state have developed under our current election code. Let's be clear, SB 90 is a voter suppression bill. This bill is part of a nationwide voter suppression effort. It is a voter suppression wave that is in direct response to citizens exercising their fundamental right to vote. In this year alone, more than 360 voter suppression bills have been filed in 47 states. These lawmakers in Florida and across the country responded to the record-breaking voter turnout with one goal in mind: to make it more difficult for people to vote. Senate Bill 90 will make it harder to vote by mail by forcing voters to submit vote by mail requests more often than is currently required. This is a completely unnecessary administrative hurdle. It will make it a crime for voters to ask a trusted friend or caregiver to pick up or drop off their vote by mail ballot. This will limit voting access for the working, elderly, and mobility impaired Floridians who cannot retrieve or return their ballots by themselves. It will restrict access to secure vote by mail drop boxes, which more than 1.5 million Floridians used safely and securely during the 2020 election. Drop boxes were so successful in Florida because working voters were able to drop off their ballot when they otherwise would not have been able to vote at an early voting location. And now our lawmakers want to restrict that access to secure drop boxes for Florida voters. Additionally, this bill prohibits providing voters with food or water or providing any item to them while they are waiting in line. With Florida's notoriously long election day lines, this is a particularly egregious and harmful provision, and cruel. Senate Bill 90 will lead to voter confusion, decreased voter access, and avoidable delays, and long lines on election day. Florida simply does not need more laws that make it more challenging for people to vote or threaten them with criminal liability. The Florida Legislature should stop trying to make it more difficult for Floridians to exercise their right to vote. They should be working to make elections more accessible, not erecting barriers designed to suppress democracy. Thank you.
Thank you, Kara, for that. And I think you heard in what she shared some of the similarities between not just Florida and Georgia, but several of these bills that are sweeping the country. There's a couple of themes. This theme of criminalization, the ways that criminalization has been put in just for feeding people, just for giving people water, just for helping people to register, the way that they are trying to criminalize the entire process of raising awareness, of educating, of registering and serving voters really shows what the intention is of all this. And then the second thing that I think you heard in there was that the attacks on local governments, that even if local entities wanted to do things differently, that they're being attacked, that their power is taken away, and in some cases, they are being criminalized. Elected officials of Board of Elections are being criminalized. And so, again, this really demonstrates how this is a wave that is sweeping the country, and why we're insisting that while we also fighting state by state, that we also recognize that this is a national movement that we've got to build for voting rights. Thank you again for that. Now going to go to David Caicedo, who's from the Florida Student Power Network. David, please take it away.
Hey folks, I'm David Caicedo, he, him pronouns with the Florida Student Power Network. And our organization was born out of a crisis, the 2016 elections. And in response to that, we've seen the number of youth voters increase tenfold. We've seen young people taking action in the streets, in their communities, really getting involved. And under these two legislations, right, it's taking us so many steps backwards, these proposed legislations. One with the right to vote. This is going to require voter IDs that actually, voter ID laws that are actually very regressive, right? That will actually limit young people's ability to vote because of the nature of the IDs that it would be requiring. It would limit the ability of young people who within our network would be criminalized, who volunteered giving food and water to folks on the lines to go vote. It would also limit the ability drastically for them to actually exercise their franchise because it would already get rid of so many drop boxes, which they found to be so useful. Second part, right, of this crisis that we were born out of was the fact that young people were taking actions. Since 2017, hundreds, thousands of college, high school students, non-college or high school young people have been taking those streets. I personally have been taking those streets. And we see that under HB1, white supremacists, like we saw unfortunately in Charlottesville, that ran over a peaceful protester, would actually be able to get away scot-free for harming our young folks. Under HB1, we see that young people would be criminalized under felony charges, ruining their lives forever. And that's something that should never be. And their list just goes on and on of the egregious attacks on young people. But while Florida continues to be the #1 state that puts children in adult prisons, while Florida continues to be the #1 state for the school to prison pipeline, while Florida continues to hold migrant children in cages, this is not a solution. Further criminalization of our youth and the youth of Florida is not a solution at all. So, our request again is of the corporations in Florida for you all to actually protect your future consumer base, protect the constituents of the state, protect the youth and the future of the state by saying no to these bills, right? Do not give more money to these folks that are really only attacking our liberties, attacking our youth, attacking the young people's ability to exercise their franchise, attacking the ability of young people to exercise their First Amendment right. So thank you so much for listening, y'all. And I can expand more if there are any questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you, David. And again, a reminder, you can put questions, members of the media, you can put questions in the chat and we'll address them during the Q&A. And again, I want to thank David. People, there's a thing in this country where we talk about, the younger generations and we say, well, what are they really about? And they're not about nothing. They're not civically engaged. And yet somehow young folks manage to do a historic summer of protest. 2 months straight, 3 months straight of consistent protest, and we're seeing it again, right? And I think we'd be remiss if we didn't mention, not only the current ongoing trial of Officer Chauvin, but also, recognizing Daunte Wright. And so young folks have told us what it takes to get them engaged. Young folks have let us know what the issues are that they're passionate about. And in response to that, for a state to then say, we are going to criminalize your activities. We are going to criminalize your passion. We are going to criminalize your protest. That's not what democracy looks like. And so I want to really do a shout out for David and the folks and the young folks that have been organizing around this and so many other issues. We're going to turn it over to Genesis Robinson from the Equal Ground Action Fund. Genesis, take it away.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Genesis Robinson. I am the Volusia County Regional Coordinator for Equal Ground Action Fund, a statewide civic engagement and community-based nonprofit in Central Florida. And we have a mission of expanding political power to marginalized communities and empowering the next generation of Black leaders. Today, as an organization, we stand in solidarity to oppose the draconian voter suppression and anti-protest laws that are being enacted throughout the country, but most importantly, that are being considered here in the Florida Legislature. It has been reported that this year alone, more than 360 voter suppression bills have been filed in 47 states, and 220 anti-protest bills have been filed in 45 states. As was the case with Stand Your Ground, it appears that Florida is committed to leading the way with oppressive and restrictive laws, which have the potential to limit someone's constitutional rights. As these proposals make their way through the legislature and we inch closer to the April 30th end date of legislative session, now is not the time to give up. Now more than ever, we must continue to amend and oppose these bad bills. In an effort to do just that, tomorrow at 6:30 p.m., Equal Ground and some of our partners will host a virtual community hearing on SB 90. This will give impacted communities and constituency groups the opportunity to testify and speak exactly to how SB 90 will negatively impact our state and their communities. We will be broadcasting this conversation live on our Equal Ground Facebook page, as well as on our YouTube channel. So please, if you're not connected with us, please connect with us and find us on those channels to be a part of that conversation. We have invited all 40 senators to come and hear these testimonies and hear directly from impacted residents. And after the hearing, we will make this testimony available not only to the legislators, but to the public, so that we can really see the cost and the impact that moving forward with these proposals will have on our state. We're in this fight because we know that making it harder for even just one person to access the ballot box, or even for one person to exercise their First Amendment right, runs contrary to what this country professes to believe in. And so we have an obligation to stand up and to fight for what is fair and just. And so at this moment, I'd like to take a moment to give a brief summary of where we are in the legislative process as it relates to both SB 90 and HB 1. So with SB 90, the voter suppression bill, they're actually hearing that bill in the Senate Appropriations Committee today. So that is expected to be basically the last stop before the bill is able to head to the Senate floor. The bill author, Senator Baxley, is offering an amendment today. They are in committee at 9 a.m. And in fact, they probably are still in committee, but he's expected to offer an amendment which would make the bill take on more language that is similar to the House version, HB 7041. So we're going to continue to monitor, see what comes out of that committee hearing and what that final version looks like before it heads to the House. But it's at its last stop over in the Senate and before it goes to the floor. HB 7041, last week it went to the Appropriations Committee. There were some amendments. It ended up passing out of committee by a vote of 17-8. Next stop is the State Affairs Committee. And once it leaves the State Affairs Committee, that bill will be ready to go to the House floor. Moving on to the anti-protest bill, HB 1, as it's known, that bill has already passed the Florida House. It had 3 committee assignments. It cleared all 3 committees, went to the Florida House, was passed out. And so now they're waiting to take on the Senate's version, which is SB 484. Now, the Senate version received several committee stops, but it hadn't had a lot of action. So the Senate president has indicated that he's committed to basically fast tracking that bill. And so they're going to probably skip over several committees, go right to the Appropriations Committee, and then report the bill out to the floor. And so this is problematic because obviously with it skipping over those committees, it denies folks the opportunity to come and speak to why this is a bad bill or offer amendments. And so they're really, shutting out people and denying them the opportunity to speak to why this is a bad proposal. So, as the legislative process continues to play out, we must stay vigilant. We have to continue to advocate for marginalized communities throughout this state. We remain hopeful that our advocacy will make a difference, and we will continue to advocate that they pull these bad bills or amend them prior to them being signed into law. So again, my name is Genesis Robinson. I'm connected with Equal Ground Action Fund, and that's all I have for you today. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Genesis. And just imagine the different points in that process that Genesis laid out, these different hearings. Imagine if all the leading companies in the state of Florida, right? Some of the ones that Rachel mentioned earlier, right? Publix and Disney. Imagine if they were at these hearings speaking out forcefully against these bills. Imagine if all the CEOs that have been signing these letters and issuing these statements by paper, imagine if they showed up and testified at these hearings. If every Fortune 500 company actually came out forcefully against these bills, we would not be having this conversation right now. That's why part of our demands, even as we're at the Capitol, even as we're writing to the elected officials, but part of our demands are for the corporate community to get involved in this battle. And again, we just want to remind folks that some of these are companies that have actually contributed to the very sponsors of these bills, this anti-protest and these voter suppression bills. So it's not just that the corporate community has been silent on these issues, it's also that they have been complicit in these issues by funding the people that are trying to take our rights away and who are quite literally putting our lives at risk. That's not hyperbole, that's not exaggeration. They are opening up the doors to, and Jamil may share an experience. Some of you may have seen a letter that's gone around from somebody who was looking forward to this bill, this anti-protest bill passing so that they can rev up their cars and attack protesters. They are literally putting people's lives at stake with these bills. So again, thank you, Genesis, and for the work of Equal Ground Action Fund. We're now going to turn it over to Sean Shaw, who is founder of People Over Profits. Sean.
Good morning, Cliff. I'm happy to be here. I actually had the honor of serving in the Florida Legislature, so I had a front row seat to what I thought was bad stuff, but even we weren't doing some of these things that we're talking about here today. Over 200 national corporations have raised their voices in opposition to voting restrictions being proposed in state legislatures across the country. And a number of corporate leaders who were involved in behind-the-scenes negotiations have now publicly condemned new voter suppression laws in Georgia. They know voter suppression and limiting our access to democracy is just bad for business. Florida's business community holds incredible power and influence, and their relationships with the leadership of the House and the Senate cannot be underestimated. They should use this power to fight for the people of this state, because our elected officials certainly won't do it on their own. They've shown us that. We're calling on Florida's business community to stand up for democracy in Florida. There are policies being fast-tracked by the legislature that are the antithesis of the basic tenets our nation was founded upon: the right to protest, the right to assembly. Instead of wielding their power to help the people of the state, legislative leadership has focused their energy on passing legislation that not one person has asked for. The Constitution belongs to the people, not just the powerful. And it's far past time that the Florida Legislature acknowledge this. And if they will not listen to their constituents, and they will not listen to us, the very same people who gave them the privilege of serving in those offices, then perhaps they'll listen to their biggest campaign contributors. House Bill 1, protest suppression. Senate Bill 90, voter suppression. Senate Bill 1890, ballot initiative suppression. These are all an affront to our democracy, and when they're taken together, it ought to paint a very, very disturbing picture of where Florida's headed. The Florida business community cannot sit this out. Too much is at stake, and we're watching. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Sean. Thank you so much. And as Sean said, he's seen this process up close and personal, so he knows what he's talking about, right? We're going to turn it over to Jamil Davis, who is our Florida lead organizer for Black Voters Matter. Before I do so, though, just want to remind those who are on the call, media who are on the call, if you have questions, please feel free to go on and use the chat feature or the Q&A feature so that you can submit your questions so that we can be ready for those when we get to the Q&A session, which will come up right after Jamil. So, Jamil, take it away.
Thank you. So today you've heard from a lot of individuals on the call, voicing their displeasure and voicing their apprehension about these two bills, these two racist and draconian bills that will inevitably put us in a place where either we will lose privileges that come with our voting rights, or we will lose privileges that come with our First Amendment right to a peaceful protest as well as public assembly. Cliff even brought it up earlier on the call about a friend of ours, partner of ours from the Florida Policy Institute, who received a letter from an individual stating that once HB1 was passed into law, they were anticipating being able to run over protesters by having the Alice Cooper song Under the Wheels being played in the background. This is a situation that we can no longer ignore. This is a situation that we can no longer just sit idly by and not say anything about. But no longer can we do it. Those within the corporate field can no longer do it as well. We are in the midst of a corporate accountability campaign with a lot of the organizations that are represented on this call today, as well as many others across the state of Florida. Our first initial act for this corporate pressure campaign was to do an ask to specifically all of the corporations in the state of Florida, asking for three things. Use your corporate influence to call your state legislators and tell them to stop HB1 and SB 90. Use that same corporate influence to call your federal legislators and tell them to vote yes on HR 1 as well as HR 4. And then use that same corporate influence to divest your funds from state legislators that have given money to HB1 as well as SB 90, or stop supporting any legislators that support these anti-protest as well as these anti-voter suppression bills. We've given the corporations in the state of Florida time to make statements. We have not heard from those corporations. And so now today we're announcing that we're moving into phase 2 of our corporate pressure campaign, targeting specifically 7 corporations that are based in the state of Florida, who we know through research have given money to state legislators that support either HB1 or SB 90. Those 7 corporations include Publix, Disney, NBC Universal, which is an owned company by Comcast, who owns Universal Studios in Orlando, Darden, who owns Olive Garden, Longhorn, as well as Cheddar's, SeaWorld, Office Depot, and Geo Group. These 7 corporations have contributed funds to state legislators who support HB1 as well as SB 90, yet have been very vocal in the past, as stated by Rachel from Dream Defenders, about being on the side of defending Black lives. So if you really are on the side of defending Black lives, then put your money where your mouth is and put your heart where your mouth is, and please stand in solidarity with us to stop HB1 and SB 90. Our next act within this corporate pressure campaign is continuing a Twitter storm that we had initiated on Friday, specifically calling those 7 corporations out and asking them what side of democracy and what side of fair assembly do you stand on? We will be having more information on more actions to come, but once again, we are looking into the eyes of Publix, Disney, NBC Universal, Office Depot, Darden, SeaWorld, and Geo Group, and asking them, what side of democracy do you stand on? Do you stand on the side of a fair democracy for all people, or do you stand on the side of white supremacy? Thank you.
Thank you, Jamil. As of now, if anybody has any questions, any members of the media, you have any questions that you'd like to put in the chat, please do so. We did receive one question coming from the Facebook stream, which was asking about what actionable steps Floridians can take to stop these bills. And I think we've already mentioned, several of those. Rachel mentioned some actions that Dream Defenders has on their website, and we'll provide that link. Jamil just mentioned, how we're advancing to phase 2, and that website that Rachel just shared is stophb1.org. Stophb1.org. Jamil just mentioned some actions. that'll be taking place. You can participate in a Twitter storm that we're going to be doing. You can participate in direct actions. That's really part of the next phase as well. You know, both here in Georgia as well as in Texas, when we've had to escalate this campaign, we've gone to the level of doing direct actions in front of Coca-Cola, in front of Delta Terminal at the airport, in front of AT&T at their business offices in Dallas, Texas. And those are going to be increasing in those states as well as in the state of Florida. And so we'll have some actions posted where folks can participate that way. You can make phone calls to any of these companies. You can send emails to any of these companies. Clog up those phone lines, clog up those email addresses, let them know that people are watching, and it will continue to escalate. Let me turn over because I see Rachel was putting something in the comments. Rachel, do you have something you want to add to that? Or anybody else on the panel? Okay, maybe.
Well, Rachel comes. For any young folks that are interested and want to get involved with the Florida Student Power Network, we've actually been having regular meetings with a lot of the legislators, both in the Senate and in the House. And we have every Thursday at 6:30 p.m., we have a strategy session where young people, Kara was on, Jamil has been on, folks from Dream Defenders have been on. But really for young people to be able to strategize and think and to plan next steps and to take action together during these calls. So every Thursday, this week Thursday, tomorrow 6:30, the link is there in the chat too for folks to join.
Anybody else? If not,
I mean, every Tuesday, we're making calls to Floridians and patching them directly into their legislators to tell them to vote no on these bills. This is very important because next week, the bill will likely go to the Senate floor for a vote. So we need as many people to join these calls as possible, and where you're calling other Floridians and transferring them directly to their senators. And then you should also call your senators as well. And then if you're interested in joining our work to put pressure on corporations, you can go to bit.ly/morethanablacksquare. When you sign the petition there, an email will go to the directors of all the corporate responsibility offices of these corporations. And so if we can flood their inboxes with thousands of emails, it's going to be a sign of power. So ask folks to sign that petition link there. And then as Cliff said, yeah, we need people to also be, taking direct action, going and talking to your neighbors, just making sure that as many people as possible know about these bills. I think, while we've been able to, there's been a national news story around the voter suppression bills, which is very, very important. There's been hardly a peep about these anti-protest bills, which are moving in 37 states across the country. So as much as we can also raise awareness about the anti-protest bills, the fact that they're attacking democracy on every single front, as Mr. Shaw talked about, it's just really important to make sure that people are aware of what's happening. So really encourage folks to talk to their neighbors, get together with people and take action. And to join our efforts, because the next couple of weeks, legislative session ends at the end of April. We really gotta leave it all on the table.
Thank you, Rachel. So we've got several questions popping up in the chat coming from reporters. Going to start with a question from Glenna Milberg. If the corporations have not responded so far and failed to respond to phase 2, will there be calls to boycott the 7 Florida companies listed? I have some thoughts on that, but I'll let anybody that wants to jump in go on and jump in. I'll just offer this as folks are thinking about that. It's important to note that in Georgia, our official coalition never officially called for a boycott, right? But what you saw happening was that as we ramped up the pressure on the corporate accountability campaign, you started to see organic calls for boycotts coming from the general public, calling from folks on social media, and then the clergy in Georgia, particularly Bishop Jackson and the AME Church, picked up that call and started demanding boycotts. And so, our focus, I believe, is for us to continue to ramp up the pressure on the corporate accountability, But in terms of boycott, anything's on the table. We didn't in Georgia ask MLB baseball to say that they weren't going to come to Georgia with the All-Star game. But when these companies leave themselves out there, and when the state puts itself out there, when the governor puts himself out there by signing such a bill, anything can happen. We in the coalition did not ask Will Smith to move the productions of his movie from Georgia. But when these states pass legislation like this, anything can happen. So I would say that anything is on the table if these companies don't respond to these requests and to the accountability that we're demanding of them. Anybody else? There's a couple of other questions in there. Folks can jump in if they want to, but I'll continue scrolling through the questions. Somebody, Daniel Figueroa asked, what part of HB1 is the most direct threat to the First Amendment?
I can talk about that. So, pretty much the whole thing, right? It's really hard to pick and choose different pieces of it because the whole bill is designed to silence dissent and chill speech. For example, as Rachel had said and as other panelists have said, if you are to go to a peaceful protest, you could be arrested with a third-degree felony, up to 5 years in prison, and loss of your voting rights, even if you didn't engage in any violent or disorderly activity. So again, that is a peaceful protest that turns violent through no fault of your own. And that is what is so chilling to speech and chilling to assembly, right? So if the First Amendment protects our right to speech and assembly, you're gonna be hesitant to participate in those First Amendment activities if the result of that could be you being arrested and imprisoned for 5 years and losing your voting rights. So it's sort of the whole bill, because that's the committing a riot portion. And if there's more than 25 people there, then it's aggravated riot, and that is 15 years in prison. So those criminal penalties are what silences the right of individuals to express themselves and their ability to feel free from criminal penalties for doing so. And that's the whole bill.
And Kara, there's a follow-up question, which you may have in fact answered already, but same person asked a follow-up. They said, can you comment on HB1's creation of a mob intimidation crime?
Yeah, it's very confusing. I mean, what is mob intimidation, right? When you think of that, you think of mobs, but the way the bill is so broadly worded, it includes just 3 people that are trying to convince somebody to change their opinion. So it is, it creates a crime out of, passionately trying to convince other people to take a different viewpoint, and therefore chilling speech.
Great. There's another question. HB1 will take effect immediately. How could that impact Floridians considering trials taking place with, or maybe they were meant to say protests taking place with Derek Chauvin and protests occurring due to recent police shootings?
So with that, if the bill is passed, as we all know, and as has already been stated, it becomes law once Governor DeSantis puts his pen to paper. It does not wait till the June or July 1st date that is always the case with most bills enacted into law here in the state of Florida. And so with the bill actually being heard on the Senate floor today and possibly being voted on next week, we're looking at a situation where this bill could literally be law before legislative session is over with, and we could still be out protesting, not even just around Dante Wright and the trial for Derek Chauvin. We could be protesting about other bills and other pieces of legislation that we consider to be trash. Let's just put that word out there. And we could be protesting about those particular pieces of legislation, and the next thing that happens and occurs is that we're protesting about these pieces of legislation with the thought in mind that HB1 is now law, and anything can happen at these protests or these rallies, and we could be facing up to 15 years.
I think this is Sean. One of the dangers is you're having a protest. Let's use a Black Lives Matter protest around one of these things, and someone who does not believe in what we believe in comes to intentionally create trouble at this protest. Guess who's going to get in trouble? The organizers of the Black Lives Matter protest and the participants thereof. That's the problem. And so Jamil and Kara are right. The trash bills always get fast tracked. The decent ones always languish in committee. So it's the worst ones that get this fast track action. And when I was in the legislature, you couldn't go a day without the Constitution or the Federalist Papers or the Bill of Rights being mentioned. Well, damn, I can't tell anymore because these bills are an affront to all of those documents, all that our country was founded on. And for all the lawyers that are apparently members of the House of Representatives and the Senate, apparently they didn't go to the first day of law school where you were taught about the freedom of press, the freedom of assembly, the freedom of speech, and all of those things. You learn that on your first day. And so it's just terribly disappointing that we're here not only passing unconstitutional bills, bad bills, oppressive bills, bills that are reminiscent of Jim Crow, but we're doing it fast and we're doing it in the middle of trials about what these entire things were about. The trial is going on now. We're trying to get justice for George Floyd right now. And as this trial is going on, we can't even pay attention to that because here in Florida, we are trying to make it so that you can't protest about things that led to the death of George Floyd. You can't do some of the things that oppressed people do when they've been oppressed for so long. So it's frustrating, but we're gonna make sure the corporations understand that we're watching and what's good for democracy is good for business.
Anybody else want to respond on that? If not, I think there's one more question from a reporter. Do you anticipate your organizing efforts will carry over into local and statewide elections next year? How will these issues and these bills carry over into future elections?
I do actually see that occurring. I know that there are a lot of counties and municipalities across the state that are currently having municipal elections this year. And one of the issues that's coming up within these municipal election debates and or speeches from some of these candidates are things concerning HB1 as well as SB90, but more so HB1, because a lot of grassroots organizations, a lot of the candidates themselves have a lot of events where they cater directly to the community and community efforts. And a lot of these candidates are worried about the possibility of just having an event where they want to touch and interact with people within their community. And one of their events could meet someone who doesn't agree with the policies of the actual candidate. And, you know, does that, a lot of candidates are asking those questions. Does this fit under events that I'm doing? As a candidate, will I have to worry about facing up to 5 to 15 years in prison for these acts if they occur at my event? We also have heard from a lot of current elected officials that's already in office about the fact that a piece of HB1 ties into the city budget and municipal and funds not being able to be reallocated from the police budget over to other areas of city budget, and how that violates home rule here in the state of Florida. We literally had the mayor of Tallahassee speak out against HB1 for that reason. And Hillsborough County District Attorney Andrew Warren spoke out against HB1, not only because it's going to incur so many cases on his desk, but also because of the fact that that particular piece of the reallocation of funds from the police budget, that falls under either the state attorney or a member of city council. So now you got the state attorney possibly looking at multiple city budgets, because they don't cover just like a specific city or county. They cover a whole district that has a plethora of counties in those particular districts. So now I have to look at a bunch of city districts if these people decide that they want to reallocate funds into other areas of city budgets. Yeah, so we definitely see this being a hot topic even into the upcoming midterm election.
Anybody else? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah,
Genesis?
also, I would add that in addition to this being a major concern for candidates and elected officials on the municipal level when it comes to the budget consideration, for our state legislators, they will have to give an account as to why they chose to support this legislation. And that's why it's so important that we as a coalition and as a collective and as a people continue to let our concerns be heard. It's not enough to have these conversations within our homes and within our, friend circles. We have to be vocal. We have to engage. We have to write, tweet, call, email, and let them know how we feel so that it can't be said that they didn't know. Because when it comes time for them to be elected again and they're asking for our support, we need to know, why did you support, voter suppression laws? Why did you support laws that took away my First Amendment right to be able to protest without, fear of going to jail? And so I think it will certainly have an impact. I think, it is just inevitable that that will be front and center as we head into the next election cycle. And then, from the other standpoint of it, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to connect the motivation for some of this, right? We know that in the state of Florida and in the state of Georgia, there are, major gubernatorial elections that will be coming up in 2022. And so that begs the question as to why are they so hard pressed to enact voter suppression laws? Why are they so hard pressed to stop dissent and stop freedom of speech? And so we know that that's the motivation behind some of this, and we just have to make sure that we hold them accountable. Like here in Volusia County, where I represent for Equal Ground, and where I call home, our entire delegation is members of the Republican Party. And so when it came to HB1, the entire delegation voted in support of HB1. When it comes to Senate Bill 90 and the House version of that, 7041, it's looking like the entire delegation will support that as well. And so as a community, they will be hearing from us, and we need to get an account for why they're voting the way that they are.
We're at 11:57, so we've only got a couple of minutes left. I'll start to close us out. I'll just offer this thought on that last question, though. Here in Georgia, after 2018, when we witnessed an election, a gubernatorial election, literally stolen, not just stolen from Stacey Abrams, but stolen from the people of Georgia, stolen from Black voters, stolen from brown voters. When we witnessed that, a lot of people said, well, how are you going to bounce back from this? What are you going to do? How is this going to impact future elections? And in 2020, we gave them the answer, right? In 2020, we were able to shock the world in part because of what we experienced in 2018. And so sometimes when these things happen, and I can see it happening with this bill, just exactly what Genesis said, people are going to be more aware of some of these issues. People are going to be more aware of what the state legislature even does when they're in session, right? And I believe that there's a way that this could be used to actually backfire on the people sponsoring that. With that said, it doesn't make what they're doing be a good thing. We don't want to be in a position of having to overcome their suppression, of having to overcome their attacks on our protests. We don't want to be in a position of having to overcome that and show that we can still win in spite of that. That's not a position we ought to be in. That's not a position that's consistent with democracy, right? So we don't want to be in that position, and we want to kill these bills. We want these bills to die, and we want the corporate community to help us to do so. At the end of the day, the corporations we're talking to, you can't continue to benefit from this democracy and you not be responsive to those of us who are trying to protect and participate in this democracy. You can't ignore the people that work in your companies, the people that spend money on your businesses, the people that make the democracy possible so that you can benefit from a business environment and from infrastructure and from all the other things that corporations benefit from. You can't continue to reap those benefits and not be responsive and accountable to those of us who make up your community, your employees, and your consumer base. You've got to be accountable. That's what this coalition is demanding, even as we're making our demands to the state legislature. And again, you're just hearing this is just the beginning. There will be a phase 2 and a phase 3 and a phase 4, but we are in this together. And as we always say, when we work together, we win. And so that's what's going to happen. And I want to thank everybody on this call, everybody in the coalition who couldn't be on this call, all of you who have attended. As we always say, can't stop, won't stop. Thanks for coming.